Hello and welcome to MathTutor. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite subject, and that would be pi. Pi is my favorite irrational number for many reasons. When you think about pi, you normally use 22 over 7 or 3.14, but when you think about it, neither of these two numbers give pi justice. Pi is actually trillions upon trillions of digits long, never ending. It goes on forever. That is the definition of an irrational number. Actually, surrounding the edges of my whiteboard today, I have around 150 of those digits of pi, but it still never ends. Around the number one supercomputer ever to have calculated pi calculated it to around 10 trillion digits. That is a lot of numbers. 10 trillion. But there really is no point in having this, considering that for most purposes it only needs 40 digits. So you don't need to memorize all 10 trillion if you want to use pi. Now let's look at the actual uses of pi. One of its easiest uses is in this, a circle. You have the center, a radius, and a diameter. If you want to find the way all the way around the circle, that would be your circumference. That equation would be pi times the diameter. If you wanted to find everything inside of this circle, then you'll use a different equation. Pi times the radius squared. Now let's see these equations in action. So let's say your radius was 5 and your diameter was 10. Then the circumference would be equal to 10 pi, and the radius would be equal to 25 pi. Simple. Now let's look as if this was a cylinder with a height of 5. So, if you wanted to find the way all the way around this cylinder, you would use the equation for surface area, which is 2 pi radius squared plus 2 radius height pi. See, pi comes up twice in this equation. Now if you wanted to find the volume, you'll use a little simpler of an equation, which would be pi radius squared times the height. Which this equation is pretty much just the base times the height, which is the volume for any prism that you'll come across. So, with these parameters, then this equation for the surface area will be equal to 50 pi plus 50 pi, which equals 100 pi. And with this equation, with the parameters set, then it would be 25 pi times 5, making 125 pi. Now, let's look as if these circles didn't have a base. So they would become a sphere. Pi is used in these equations also. So, say you wanted to find your way all the way around this sphere, you would use the equation for surface area, which is 4 pi r squared. But say you wanted to find everything inside of it, you'll use the equation 4 pi r cubed over 3. Both these equations involve pi because this is a circular object. So, let's look as if the radius was 5. Keeping it simple. So, 5 times 5 would be 25 times 4, it would be 100 pi. Now, in this equation, 5 times 5, 25 times 5 is 125. times 4 would make 500 over 3. So it's 500 over 3 times pi. Very simple. Now, let's look at actually how we calculate for pi. There's two really cool equations that I like a lot, and they're pretty slow, but they're used to calculate pi if you have free time and you just want to see. One of these equations is Buffon's needle. It pretty much says if you have parallel lines equidistant apart, that you can find what pi is equal to using a simple equation: 2n L over x times t. Now, let me explain this. What you're going to do is you take a pin, or a needle, or a pen, or a pencil, anything that's straight, and you'll drop it on this line, on any of these lines, and using the amount of times that this pin or pen or needle or pencil crosses one of these lines, then you will use this equation to find out what pi is approximately equal to. So, n is the amount of times that you're going to be dropping this needle. X is the amount of times that this needle will cross one of these parallel lines. T is the distance between these parallel lines, and L is the length of the said needle. I actually did a test of this. I only did 10 test runs with a 2.5 centimeter needle. So that's 2 times 10 times 2.5 over. It landed across the line 7 times, and the lines were 1.8 centimeters apart. So that would be 2050 over 12.6, which doesn't exactly equal pi. Actually, it equals out to about 3.9. But if you have enough time and you do a lot of test runs for this, then you will get a number that's very close to pi. Now, another method for discovering pi is using what's called a Monte Carlo system. A Monte Carlo system pretty much says if you had a circle neatly fit into a square where all the edges of the square are tangent to the circle, meaning they touch at just one point and then they continue off without touching anywhere else on that circle, then you can actually find what pi is equal to. What you do is you just place random dots all over the square, and the amount of times that it lands inside of that circle, when you compare it to the areas of the circle and the square, you will get eventually to an equation that looks like this: 4 over pi. So you can pretty much use this random assessment of dots to discover what pi is using a very complicated formula, which I do not have at the moment. So this is everything you need to know about pi for using pi, solving for pi, and discovering what pi is. So thank you, and yeah, bye.